Hey guys, welcome back to the Golf Podcast. This is episode number 386. And Mike, I think one of the most exciting things for us as golfers is we're all fortunate enough to live in a time right now where the technology for the sport is just absolutely being revolutionized.
It's insane.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And as golfers, we're the ones who are going to be able to benefit from it. There are things, it just seems like rapid fire, more and more tools that are becoming available that we get to use to better our game. And there's one that we got to take a look at firsthand today that was really, truly, I think maybe the word mind-blowing is overused to a certain extent, but here I truly feel like it's applicable.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right?
I mean, my mind was blown.
Yeah, I could see it in your face.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about is a new technology called OptiMotion, which is available as of right now at all GOLFTEC locations, which they have, I think, over 200 of them worldwide. And you're going to hear us talk about our experience with it, but we're also going to bring Nick Clearwater on. He's the VP of Instruction for GOLFTEC, and he really intimately knows this technology. But to put it in a nutshell, this is and I think for all you visual learners out there, this is something that's going to really strike home with you. But what it is a 2-camera system that it's at the GOLFTEC locations. It's a down the line and a face-on camera. And where the magic happens is somehow, and I don't know how, maybe Nick can break it down for us in a few minutes, but somehow it uses some sort of AI technology to actually identify the different points and joints on your body and provide real-time, in the moment, immediate feedback measurements from everything to rotation in terms of degrees, to things like spine angle, sway. All those things are measured. And what's so remarkable about it, Mike, is it's all done without having to wear any fancy suits or reference points.
It's just those 2 cameras. How amazing was that?
I was amazed.
And the fact that it was just like really like turnkey. You walk in and you just go.
Right.
You know, he's like, hit a ball, let's get a baseline. And I'm like, wait, that's it?
Right. Which allows them to use it in all of their lessons.
Right.
But I think what we're going to kind of really hone in on here is that the technology may be mind-blowing. It's well above our pay grade of how this thing works. But I think more importantly, it's when the tools are placed in the right hands is when you really start to see the magic happen. So here we're getting a measurement device that standalone on its own would not do a whole lot for you. I'm sure it's giving you that feedback, but it's the integration with the actual coaches. It's what it allows the coaches to see. And there's a lot of coaches out there who have been doing this for a long time. They've got a great eye, but I don't care how good your eye is, you're not going to be able to measure rotation in degrees.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's where we have this tool that can allow them to make the lesson even better. And we'll talk about this even more, but my take, at least my feeling, Mike, was in a world where we're all so limited on time, if you can give me something that can make my 1 hour or whatever your lesson session is that much more impactful, I'm all in.
I honestly felt that I received 3 to 5 lessons in that 1 hour today.
Right. Because you got to see, and again, we're putting the cart before the horse. We're going to talk about this all with Nick in a second, but you get to see all those measurements of where your swing is now. You work with the coach. They give you a drill or two. You make 1 or 2 different adjustments. Maybe it's a setup, something we've been talking about in the podcast a lot. And then you do it again. And now you instantaneously get to see the changes that were made in all of those measurements. So in a nutshell, and like I said, we'll break this down more. We'll even have Nick describe it. He can probably describe it better than I can. But it's a visual system that is going to give an analysis. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like Terminator stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just wild what it's able to do. And again, I want to stress that this is all done just through the use of cameras. There's no special equipment that you have to be strapped into that you're worried about that limiting your swing. It all just kind of happens right there.
I love it.
So what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to bring Nick in on the show. He's going to tell us a little bit more about it. Like I said, it's just something that we're super excited for because I think it's this type of stuff that's going to really kind of move the needle and make us all golfers better, because now we've got more and more resources that simply did not exist a matter of months ago.
Right.
It just was not something you could do.
You know, a lot of times we do walk out of a lesson and there's so much information digested and we're just trying to figure out where to go from there. But I love these like instant feedbacks, and I'll talk about this with Nick, but I just, the aha moments just kept happening because of that instant visual feedback on the screen, the comparison against the Tour Pro, all that stuff. That technology is phenomenal. So I feel like I learned a lot today.
You know what's wild too is all of that visual feedback that you get it all goes right into the GolfTec as an app, so you can re-review it. Because how many times we talked about on the podcast, you get a lesson, you're feeling good, you're playing well, and then after a little while, it kind of like, you know, they kind of like lose it.
Yeah.
And you need a reminder. Well, now you can go back and rewatch the lesson. So there's a lot of great stuff. Let's do a quick word from our sponsor, and then I don't want to delay it. I want to bring Nick right on. I know he's waiting, and I'm excited to talk to him. So first, I want to thank our sponsor, Titleist. And guys, we're excited to share all types of exclusive opportunities from Titleist, but to be a part of them, you have to join Team Titleist. Team Titleist gives you access to opportunities like prototype testing, special events, limited edition gear from Titleist, so much more. The best part is it's free and super easy to join. So join us on Team Titleist. Go to Titleist.com/Team Titleist. That's one word, Titleist.com/Team Titleist. Join us, and Team Titleist, I mean, like I said, we've been in some of those events. Hopefully we'll get a chance to run into one of you guys there.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, they are fun.
Those are cool. And guys, did you know that FootJoy has been the #1 shoe on tour for 75 years? Yeah, that's a pretty long time. I mean, these guys were innovating then, and they continue to do it today. I mean, with the simple goal to elevate their game so that you can elevate yours. I mean, they're always trying to improve our game. I mean, they build shoes for every single player, every swing, every stance, every lie, everything you can think of, everywhere you might play in this world, they have come up with a shoe designed for it. So whether it's the style or the performance of the Premier Series, which we're loving, and the Hyperflex, which we love too, those are my pillows on my feet that I love those shoes, and the traction and the comfort of the Pro SLs, a fan favorite. We love our Pro SLs, or a number of their other shoes. There's so many in the catalog, guys, and you probably don't even know about them. Even those flexes are great to just kind of chill and walk around with.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm wearing mine right now.
Wearing them right now.
Yeah.
I know, exactly. So FootJoy offers the best shoes that are right for your game. FootJoy, they're passionate about the progress, and it's the best, their game has ever looked. Honestly, they're really ramping up. Not only the shoes, but the clothes too.
Yeah,
I mean,
no doubt.
The designs, everything. Everyone's coming up to me. A guy stopped me in the grocery store and he's like, "Dude, I love that shirt." It was one with the margaritas on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, man, FootJoy. They're coming up with cool stuff. Check it out."
Yeah.
So guys, find the shoe that's right for your game at footjoy.com/shoefinder, and that tool will definitely help you find that shoe.
No doubt about it. All right, let's bring Nick on the show right now and dive into OptiMotion. Okay, guys, so we have Nick Clearwater on the show, and not only is he the VP of Instruction, like we mentioned earlier, of GolfTec, but you may recognize Nick from Golf Channel. He's also a regular contributor to Golf Magazine, and we're really excited to have him on the show. Nick, welcome to the Golf Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. That was awesome to talk about our new tech with the two golf wizards like you guys.
I'll tell you what, well, having the opportunity, as we talked about before, to experience it firsthand, we're super excited to dig into this one, because it was really, I mean, like I said, the word mind-blowing sometimes is overused, but in this case, we really felt it. It was just, especially the speed with which this thing works. But before we put the cart before the horse, let's give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit, you've got the real experience with it. So tell us, what is OptiMotion?
Sure. So great question. Perfect place to start. So about 5 years ago, we got some brand new cameras from one of our vendors, OptiTrack. They're awesome partners. You might know them from the Gear system as well. Mm-hmm. It's their parent company. So we've had these cameras that are HD, super high quality, super fast. They shoot up to 1,000 frames per second. And we wanted to get rid of the motion measurement system that we had before and try to come up with something new and cool. So we've been ideating how we could do that. So what OptiMotion really is the child of all those thoughts for the past few years. It's a super cool and unique way to get your swing measured. Something like this doesn't exist anywhere in golf in particular, and probably in sports. The two cameras that we use in every single lesson are tracking you wirelessly, contactlessly. There's no touch points or any gear that you need to wear, so there's no markers or sensors at all. You literally can get your swing measured by just walking into a GolfTec, hanging out with your coach, strolling up to the hitting mat, and the system captures you, starts measuring your swing, and begins giving you and the coach really digestible data that you can use to get better at golf.
I was just going to say, Nick, one of the things that out of the gate, you walked into the room and you just alluded to it, was the fact that it's so fast. It's up and going. Nick over there, who we work with today, the minute I stepped on the mat, I could see the lines on my body on the screen. There was no advanced setup. There was nothing to put on, to wear, things like that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you did a nice little dance there. That's what most people
like that, right?
have tended to do, Mike. Yeah.
Wait till you see the video. It's a little bit better.
That's the dance pose. But yes, yeah, you just walk on the mat, and not having to get strapped up or wired up is such an advantage. And it is for us because our coaches are so busy. Nick's going to teach at least a dozen golf lessons today. If he has to take time to put suits on you and markers or anything wearable, that takes time away from your experience. You don't get the same amount of time with him, and it slows him down. Plus, just having to wear something that isn't your normal golf clothing does change your swing form, and it'll change the system of how you try to play golf. So, we're trying to give the most golf-like experience you can get, but give you some really cool data.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too. It was what stood out to me was how instantaneous it was.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a very long like calibration process, or as you said, nothing to put on. Mike stepped in front of the cameras, and within seconds we saw these reference dots on his body in like kind of a whatever you want to call it, like an augmented reality on the screen in front of us. And then instantaneously measurements started popping up, spine angle and rotation and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about those measurements. What exactly, and you had mentioned earlier that it's giving measurements for the coaches. What is OptiMotion measuring?
Yeah, great question. So you've got 15 different points that the system is tracking for you in 3D space. So this is where what we're doing starts to deviate from maybe what you've seen in other apps before, or you can almost download any app on your phone that will make either an avatar of you, or it will put like a bone structure stick figure like on top of you. But to get actual data from one camera view is not a real thing at this point in time. We have a plan on how we might start dabbling in that with the experience that we have from two cameras, but you really need those two cameras to come up with a 3D key point. So it's not so much that you might see like a dot on my right shoulder. That doesn't actually give me the ability to start measuring how much my shoulders might be tilting to the left or to the right. That's a little harder to come across on a podcast, but if you're watching this video style, the tilting to the left and right, the amount that you turn your shoulders open or close relative to the target. A dimension in golf that's not talked about very much is the forward and backward bending that you can measure from both your hips and your shoulders. And then sway, which is one of the biggest separators of skill. Is the location of the center point of your shoulders or the center point of your pelvis. And that is also inside of you now, the point in between your shoulders. And how much that moves either away or toward the target is a massive separator of skill, and one that we've reported on before with our previous wired system. But with OptiMotion, now we have a new data point that is a lot of fun to use, interrelated to other lesson takers, and a way for us to compare hundreds and thousands of golfers and show what the best players do versus the worst, which ultimately gives your coach a much better chance of getting you aimed down the right direction very quickly, very repeatably, and very reliably to an outcome that'll help you play better.
Yeah, and from our experience from the student side of it, I think one area where you can kind of have that, where you kind of go cross-eyed effect, is when a coach starts to talk about things like spine angle and things like that without some sort of, I mean, I'm a visual learner, maybe a lot of our listeners are too, but that visual in front of us. So not only did we get to see it and we got to see those reference points and the lines drawn, but also an additional reference point of having something to compare it against. So I want you to tell us a little bit about this. One thing we were able to do in our lesson was pull up the professional golfers, some PGA Tour golfers' swings, so we can kind of look at that, not in a point of trying to copy their swing, but just to give us a visual representation of some of the things and how we should be doing it. So tell us how that's worked into the system.
Well, you explained it pretty well right there. No coach should really be trying to make you swing like a PGA Tour player. That isn't the point. But PGA Tour players are awesome models for hitting a golf ball the way you want. So, for example, you might have had John Rahm as a comparison, for example. He's a great model for how to hit a golf ball very far off the tee and know where it's going. So there's a reason that you'd want to diagnose his swing some and compare that to your swing style to look for some comparisons and differences that ultimately make John hit the ball really far, and that you could learn from as well. So that's the value of comparing yourself to other people. Our OEM partners have been awesome at providing us with some tour player video that you saw as comparisons that way. So a big part of learning is to get a visual comparison of what you do and what a PGA Tour player does, see what's different and what needs to be changed to ultimately influence how you hit a golf ball. And that's what you were experiencing in that lesson. Couple that with some motion measurements of we're actually quantifying things like you referenced spine angle. We'd probably describe that most frequently as the amount of forward or backward bend you have, coupled with the amount of tilt that you'd have to the left or the right in the backswing. And that's that formula put together is a measurable, quantifiable way to talk about spine angle that way. And if you just get a golf lesson with someone who can't really teach with tech, not because they're of inability, but because it's complicated to get, it's hard to find, and then giving a good experience with it is complicated. You have to know quite a bit to be a master of a system of motion measurement like what you got with Nick today. Then it's not part of how you learn. So you're left with much more of a subjective view from your instructor. You have to hope that that message comes across well without objective tools like OptiMotion gives you. And learning is just less predictable, less reliable, and it can take longer.
Yeah, and that's where I was saying that we were so impressed visually with how the technology was working, but where we felt that the true magic happened was in that synergy where the coach and the tech came together. Because be honest with you, even with it simplified in ways that I thought were really well designed in the actual user interface, where we were seeing colors that signified good or bad, and you didn't necessarily have to know your numbers, but still there was so much on there. Just having a coach who understood that and can kind of walk you through it was interesting. But another thing I found really interesting, and Mike, you saw this firsthand and you using it, is not only knowing the numbers, but we got to understand how they related to each other. So for example, because both numbers were on the screen, when Mike did something as simple as just kind of reducing his sway and instead just kind of using a little bit more of that body rotation, we immediately saw the effect in all the other numbers. So we saw him get a lot more of the shoulder rotation. He got far more degrees of shoulder rotation as a secondary factor to what he was working on with his spine angle. So it's not something that I think I would have thought of otherwise, unless it was in front of my face right there on the screen.
Right. It was also one thing to look at the numbers, but then immediately when he threw the tour player next to me,
right,
and I got to see both swings side to side, and I saw we used Zach Johnson in our analysis today to see his swing plane and then compare it right to mine and say, wow, I can instantly see where I'm going wrong.
Yeah, there's just something about that visual
instant feedback in conjunction with those numbers and that color coding of you were in the red and the blue, but now you did it again and you're in the green. Aha. And then you feel good and you're like, all right, I think I'm getting this during the lesson, as opposed to going into a lesson, leaving, and then just trying to figure it all out again.
Right. So I guess what I would be interested in finding out is that's our experience from what it made it easier for us to learn, but from the coach's experience, what does this tool really do for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, you brought up a great point. I wasn't at your lesson today, Mike, but I want to talk about the swing style you're using on the backswing,
Sure.
probably, and you can test me, see if I'm close. But all this data I think people get afraid of data because it's sometimes often used poorly, or the naming convention or the language used by people who want to represent scientific data is more complicated than it should be. What a lot of data allows an expert coach to do is use it very simply. So most of my lessons, while I'm using 16 different data points in every single lesson, including the trail knee flex, which I think you got a touch of today too. The lesson that I give might be looking at all that data to help me make a good observation and orient the lesson towards something that will help you get better. But my golf instruction might be something as simple as on this backswing, just move your hands a little bit more inward to get the swing started, or close the face a little bit more when the shaft's parallel to the ground in the backswing. That's the way an expert of golf instruction would use a lot of complicated data. So the more data we give the coaches, the more that we also train them. I've got a team of 4 guys here that work with me as well, and it's their job to make sure that our coaches know what to do with that data and the simplification of the color coding system that you saw in there. It just makes their day easier. And now they don't have to put on a wired sensor system, and we're limited to just the 2 key points that we used to be able to measure, which were really good. Those key points were demonstrated 23% of the separation in skill level, according to the PhDs that work for us. But now we've got a host of different measurements. We can measure about 16 different motion measurements right now. Plus, we're even dabbling in new ones because we have all these different key points. We can measure some new pieces, like in my Q Next alpha testing already is your lead arm and how much that flexes throughout the entire swing. And then there's also, Gears calls it a shoulder angle, or really the abduction or adduction of your arm, how much you move that away or towards your midline. Those are going to be huge separators of skill as well. And then couple that with all the lessons that we give, millions of them a year. Now we have some data from students who are average players to the best players to rank beginners. We teach them all, and we teach them all really well. We'll be able to then tie that data and how people use those different motion measurements to skill level, which comes up with a great study about what really separates good players from bad players. Then we train our coaches on that so that they can very quickly and efficaciously find starting points to begin with different people. And boom, you've got a super effective teaching system that way.
Yeah, it makes so much sense as you're like that mountain of data that's coming in with all these students, and you can even start to put them in groups of different levels and handicaps and looking where there might be some commonalities. But again, I'm just so amazed with the fact that all of those measurements, I can't drive this home enough. And I think our listeners have to go into a GOLFTEC and see this to believe it, but those measurements are happening just from visual cues from this advanced camera system. I mean, I can't drive it home enough that you're not wearing anything. I was just so blown away by the fact that it was measuring everything. But, you know, kind of going back to what you're saying, it was kind of funny to see both ends of the spectrum working together, the highest and the lowest possible tech. We had the camera system measuring, and then we were fixing Mike's swing with a pool noodle.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. So I mean, that's the art, right? Put those two together. Yeah. So,
and you nailed it. That's the art of it all. Like Mike's particular problem is one that I think is really common in golf too. So, Mike, it sounds like you got a little bit of a hip sway lesson and how that correlates to the amount you can turn your shoulders in the backswing. We find that one all the time. So the hip sway for all the viewers or listeners right now is just where the center of your pelvis is at and how much that moves towards or away in the backswing. The longer that you move your hip sway away from the target in the backswing, the more complicated it is to actually turn your shoulders. Now, I would suggest that the best players in the world have a pattern of moving their hip sway away from the target for about the first 1.5 feet that the golf club moves. Then they begin to move the center of their pelvis towards the target again. Now, unfortunately, a lot of golf dogma and golf instruction is that you've got to load up into your right glute or your right hip, or you got it into your right side, any of those. Well, I might argue that probably isn't wrong if you take it at face value. But what's missing in that description is a way to know, well, have I done this too much or for too long, or when do I stop doing that? That is totally left out of the description. What we're able to do is then quantify and measure that so that we can actually tell you, this is how long you should do that before you need to stop, because anything more than that and you start to get to a very detrimental place and hurt your game. We see most amateur players who come in and don't turn their shoulders very much. The biggest correlation to shoulder turn is the amount that you turn your hips in the backswing, and then also the amount of time that you extend your thoracic spine or begin to bend backward. We measure all of those things, and we can solve people who don't turn their shoulders very much in the backswing, which may or may not have been your problem, but it sounds like you had a good effect with the hip sway piece to add more shoulder turn. But we fix people who have never been able to turn their shoulders 90 degrees in minutes because we're able to measure that and have a simple system that works for everyone.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I can't say enough the visual cues, because even as I hear you explaining it and you start to say, well, the pros, like this is when they shift and this is when whatever, that's one thing. But then when you see it and it's put in a split screen right next to your swing, and then you go, oh, okay, I get it now. I see how his pelvis is moving and I see mine right next to it. And I can kind of, again, not copying someone's swing, but I can kind of replicate that motion and include that motion into my swing. Again, I think that was one of the driving factors for us.
100%. Yeah, totally agree.
How'd I do on that one, Mike? Was that pretty much your lesson?
Absolutely.
I wasn't there.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, and, you know, for me, I think it was the second swing when I got the aha moment. That's how fast. It was like you came in, we took a baseline. He immediately knew that I sway. I mean, it's obvious. He saw it. But it was then, okay, let's fix it right now. Let's not just keep talking about it. And that's what I love. And then that's when he pulled out the pool noodle and all that stuff. And it's like, all right, let's fix it and let's stop doing this. Because I've been told 100 times that same issue. Like I already knew that coming in, that's what he was going to find. Right. But now I was able to see it a little bit more, understand why it was happening, see it versus the Tour Pro, and understand it even more so after that, and then work on it. And, you know, and that's what's going to happen, I'm assuming, if someone comes into GolfTec and takes a lesson, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what a lesson is, and it should be done that way. It should be that quick too. Like we hear that stuff all the time of this. They eventually find their way to GolfTec. Students do eventually, based upon some previous experience with other golf lessons, and then it's our job to straighten that out really quickly. And it really doesn't matter who you are, what you swing like, what your golf problems are. The coach, like you met with Nick today, he's seen it all, and there isn't anyone that's going to walk through there that's going to paralyze him or he won't know what to do. He's got it.
Yeah. And I think one other side of that coin is, yes, the speed of which Mike was able to see it and then start to have that aha moment, but also a lot of us who go and take lessons, one of the laments is that we feel like all excited walking out of there and we've got some drills that we can work on, but then it kind of slowly starts to seep away. So I think another part I want to have you talk about is how Optimotion is integrated with the GolfTec app, because I think that's the reminder that some of us need when we start to slip into our old habits, or we want to go have that range session, but we want to make sure we're practicing with a solid purpose. So can you tell us a little bit about how this data kind of works hand in hand with the app?
You got it. So currently, the lessons that you take in the bay, the swings that you made today, Mike, in particular, you'll be able to go view those in online anytime that you want, and that's what you're referring to as the Clubhouse app. So you can see the videos that you made with your coaches. Nick recorded a bunch of your golf lesson today. You'll be able to listen to those again. I think that's a nice perk and a nice way for you to be reminded of what you do to get better. It's also just another touch point that keeps you engaged with us, so that you know that here's what you need to work on. There's some accountability on your end as well to keep doing what your coach suggested. And then next week or 2 weeks from now, whenever you'd go back again, you already have a pretty good base. Your coach can always go back and review those as well. You know what the next lesson is going to pertain to and how to continue to progress that way.
Yeah. And you know what I like too is that, and I've heard some other good coaches talk about this before, is when you're measuring something other than score, you can sometimes see the progress that you might not otherwise have seen. So for example, like if we're working on something like sway, that might not translate immediately into your score. And I think that's another area where a lot of golfers kind of drop off or they get discouraged. They're working on it versus in a situation like this where we can measure it, we can say like, all right, it hasn't worked. It's all the way back to your score hasn't come down yet because you're in a process, you're in a progress. But versus your last lesson, I measured you at 2 inches of lateral sway. I'm measuring you at 1. So the drills we're having are working. And then I think it provides some sort of positive feedback that tells you, stay the course, you're getting there. Do you agree with me with that?
Oh, yeah, totally. Not every lesson has to end in improvement. I mean, it's going to be incremental over time. And I wouldn't expect to walk into your first lesson and drop 5 shots off of your score.
Right.
Our average student drops 7 shots in a year. And that happens slowly over time to continue to build the consistency that allows you to drop those 7 shots repeatedly and reliably over time. Yeah. But at the same point in time, a lot of students that come into us have similar problems: too much spin loft, too much dynamic loft, too much of a leftward swing direction or out to in. And a coach can fix those pretty quickly, which will lead you to lower shots that tend to draw and go farther. That in of itself doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to score better, because now you could be hitting shots over the green, or just the pattern of shots no longer is in the right trees. Now it's on the green or the left rough. All that doesn't necessarily equate to faster or lower score right away, but over time, with a little bit of dedication and a really qualified coach, and you've got that recipe.
That's very cool. And one of the last things I want to go over with you before we let you go is another thing that Nick kind of pointed out to us today that I thought was really cool, and again speaks to the ease of use of this system. Was he said as part of the practice plan with GolfTec, you can actually, even when you're not in that moment working with your coach, you can go in there and utilize Optimotion in your practice session. So just expand on that a little bit, how that works.
Sure. So if you have a motion measurement that you wanted to practice with, let's take like shoulder turn at the top of the swing. a little bit of Mike's lesson today. You could walk into a GOLFTEC, just have a 30-minute practice session, which we include in our game plans. That's an important part of using the same technology you get in a golf lesson with your coach, to come in and just have some time to practice it yourself with the technology. Now you can do that. So if you wanted to measure shoulder turn at the top of your swing, you can do that for every single swing very quickly while you're in there practicing. Check out the video, check out the motion data, and know if you're on the right track. It should help you get better faster, which is the whole point of how to practice. A lot of people, as you guys know, you're experts at this, you see people who just mindlessly practice, or they don't really know what they're doing, or there's definitely no quantification to the practice itself to know if you're doing it well. We have a system design that will help you know if you're on the right track or not and make some faster progress.
We are 100% all about practicing with a purpose, especially the busy lives we lead. You know, most of us, ourselves included, we're not golf pros. We're not making our living this way. We've got to fit our practice sessions in between all of our other life's commitments. So something like this, where you can get a half hour of very feedback-oriented practice versus just beating a bucket of golf balls. I mean, it's worth its weight in gold in that session. So that was one thing that kind of hit home with me. Not only, like I said, taking the data away and being able to reference it, but being able to go in and practice it. And if that doesn't speak to the ease of use, that you can walk in and use the system essentially on your own, I don't think anything does. But again, I'm just going to encourage our listeners. This is something that, you know, we could talk about it to death. You got to see it firsthand. I think your face is going to look the same as ours did when we stood in front of that camera and all of a sudden saw this augmented reality with all of our measurements in front of us. I mean, I commend, you know, the entire GOLFTEC team on putting this thing together. I think you guys are really on to something. And Nick, I appreciate you coming on the show today and giving the time and telling us a little bit more about it.
No, thanks, guys. I sincerely appreciate the kudos you give there. But you're right. We can talk about this ad nauseum, but the best way to do this is get the experience for yourself. If you're a serious golfer, getting a swing evaluation with a professional coach who knows what they're doing is almost like mandated if you're serious about golf. If you're not, that's another story. But if you're serious about playing golf, you have nothing but things to gain from this experience.
Yeah, and it's a tool, honestly, we could have only dreamt of having not that long ago, and now it's there. We can use it. I think, how many locations do you have now, Nick?
Well, we've got 212 across the entire world. About 170 of those in the U.S. continental. So if you find us at golftech.com, you can find there's an easy way to search it for a location that's near you.
There you go. So chances are you've got one near you. So guys, I encourage you, go out, check it out. You got to experience OptiMotion firsthand and let us know about the experience. I would be very interested to hear if you were as mind blown as we were. You can leave a comment, or as always, you can drop your thoughts in our Facebook page. But again, Nick, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Like I said, some of this technology, it's like, it's for them to figure out. I'm just glad they did.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm still, as I said, just talking to Nick and seeing it first person, just so impressed. And in that first moment, you stand in front of that camera, you look up at the screen, and all of a sudden you see your body with all of these measurements on it.
Yep.
And as you move, it moves. And then just the fact that they took something so technologically advanced and made it simple to understand. I loved the color coding, and then you were in the red, and then you're just working your way towards the green. And again, it's just taking something that it just really is a tool that I think is going to help golfers. So when we saw it, we said, we got to talk about it here on the podcast, because I know this is going to help the listeners as well.
For sure. I mean, I always tell people, like, when you explain something to me, tell it to me like I'm 5.
Right.
You know, you add some colors to it, that helps me. And I know we joke about it, but it's so helpful because it's instant feedback. It was red, it turns to green, boom, I think I got it. So
right. And the ability to do a drill with the coach and then immediately see that drill is working. Because, you know, as golfers, we're used to doing something one way for a long time. Doing the drill, it may feel weird or feel awkward or feel wrong, but then being able to see it, that visual feedback, be like, oh, now I see how that is giving me, 10 more degrees of upper body rotation, or I have, an inch less of sway in my hips. I'm seeing it there right in front of me. It's driving the point home, and I know that I'm making progress. And I think that is one of the biggest keys here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So excited to see more of this. I'm sure we'll be doing more with GolfTec and checking these out in the future, guys. Definitely go to golftech.com. Luckily, like I said, this is not something that's going to be limited, that you have to live in a certain area. They've got 200 locations worldwide, over 200 locations worldwide. So there's a very good chance that there's going to be a GolfTec with OptiMotion near you. It's worth a look. Give it a look. Check it out. You can get to everything we talked about today by going to the show notes. Go to golficity.com/episode 386. And we'll see everybody again next week.